Welcome back to Knit Your Stress Away, your podcast all around knitting for stress relief. My name is Nadine. I'm your host here on the podcast. And this is another installment of the Summer Throwback Series that we are doing here in July on the podcast, where I am bringing back episodes from the last year and a half on this podcast. Back then, it had a different name, but it's the same podcast, and I'm also the same person behind the microphone. But today's episode is actually the first interview that I ever had on this podcast, and it was with my friend Alexi from Two of Wands. She is one of my favorite knitwear designers, and I was just so thrilled to have her on this podcast as the first person to be interviewed. She has such an inspiring personality. She has such an inspiring business, and her way of designing things is just so unique. And I really, really loved interviewing her and hearing all about the behind the scenes of a knitwear design business with Alexi. So I hope you enjoy as well, and let's dive in. Welcome back to the Knitting Mamas podcast. This week's episode is so special to me because I had the privilege of interviewing one of my favorite designers in the knitting world, Alexi Tavel from Two of Wands. She designs the most incredible crochet and knitting patterns, and on this week's podcast episode, she's letting us in on what life as a knit designer is like. I am so excited. Check it out. Hey there, Mama. Welcome to the Knitting Mamas podcast. If you're a mom who's tired of feeling exhausted and longing for some well-deserved self-care and rest, you are in the right place. I know that finding time for yourself as a busy mom can feel like an impossible puzzle. But guess what? You don't have to compromise anymore. Hi, I'm your host, Nadine Medina, and just like you, I am a mom, wife, and also a happy knitter. Over my 15 years of motherhood, I have been on a journey to discover how to truly recharge without the guilt and the never-ending quest for perfection. The secret? It's all about progress, not perfection. By focusing on simple routines, natural wellness solutions, and the cozy art of knitting, I found the path to feeling whole and content. And on this podcast, I am sharing it all with you so you can do the same. Are you ready to find simple solutions to set yourself free from mom guilt, to take more time for yourself to truly rest, and to use your knitting skills for a mindful routine that creates space in your life so you can breathe easier? Let's take a deep breath, grab those knitting needles, and say goodbye to mom stress. Together, we'll create a supportive community that encourages you to prioritize self-care while juggling all your responsibilities. Sound good? Let's do this. All right, welcome to the Knitting Mamas podcast. Hi, Alexi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. We have another guest here. River, baby River, is sitting in my lap. So if anyone hears some little other noises, that's who's chiming in. He's trying to answer.
Thanks so much for being on this podcast.
Of course.
And I would like to just start up by asking you if you can just kind of introduce yourself a little bit to my listeners and to us, and also maybe talk about how you started your business. I love following you. I love your designs. I have made plenty of your designs, and I have more in the queue. So I'm just super curious about, how you first got into knitting and crocheting, and how you got your business started and when.
Absolutely. Happy to answer those questions. So I would say I first learned how to knit. My grandmother and my mom both kind of individually taught me here and there throughout my childhood. And it would be something where it would be around the holidays or something, I'd want to make a gift and I would forget how to cast on, or I'd forget the knit stitch, or I'd forget how to bind off. And so it was constantly learning the same things over again. But, it's kind of like riding a bike. You eventually it clicks. And my mom is an artist, so I grew up with all sorts of arts and crafts around me all the time. We would paint the walls and the floor, and, I made clothes and always was like building forts and doing sculptures and cooking and all sorts of really fun, creative endeavors. And I ended up studying fashion design and costume construction in college. But it was like an interesting program because I went to school at Indiana University, and they did not have a fashion program there, but they did have this costume construction technology degree because the Musical Arts Center there is a huge part of the campus. And so we would dress the operas and the ballets, and I made tutus and costumes for all of the performances.
That sounds so fun. That's
was really
awesome.
fun. And there was this individualized major program you could do where you basically got to choose your own curriculum. And there were several students who wanted to do more of like a fashion design degree. So they already kind of had a skeletal,
Hmm.
curriculum for that. So I basically did that in tandem with the costume construction degree. And so I have a bachelor's in fashion design and an associate's degree in
Wow.
costume construction technology. But it was interesting because, Indiana is not, I would say, the most fashionable place. And so much of what we learned was really like hand stitching, hand couture
Oh,
techniques. I didn't take any draping classes. We didn't have them. It was a lot of like hand tailoring and, like really, really couture techniques. We weren't allowed to use sergers or anything to finish our seams. Everything had to be done by hand. And so I think that kind of got me back into like handcraft type of stuff. And funnily enough, we also weren't allowed, I had to have like a senior fashion show, basically. It was like half presentation, half fashion show. And I think I had 24 looks, not 24 pieces, but 24 looks. It was an incredibly intense program for not really being one. And we weren't allowed to use knits. And like I said, and everything had to be hand finished. So I had all this woven stuff. And I did learn flat pattern drafting though, which I think has served me well, understanding like garment construction and whatnot from that. But as soon as I graduated, I moved to New York City with, big dreams of working in the fashion industry. And I quickly realized it wasn't really for me. There's a lot of, like, insecurity and bad energy in the fashion world, and I did work for a designer for a little while. I had been there the longest of anyone after 8
oh
months
my gosh.
because it was such a toxic environment. So, you could see it just, like, it felt icky to me, and I have a lot of friends in the modeling industry, both models and so while I was kind of trying to figure out my next thing, a friend of a friend who's a model hired me to be her personal assistant. Her name is Petra Nemkova, and she had survived the Indian Ocean tsunami in Thailand
Oh,
in
wow.
2004. And so she had recently recovered. She was looking to start a nonprofit to help in some way. Having gone through that, she ended up starting an organization called Happy Hearts Fund, which rebuilt schools after natural disasters worldwide. And so I started working for her right around the time she was starting that process. And so I kind of helped her build Happy Hearts Fund. And I worked both for her and for the foundation for 8 years. And the whole time I was doing that, I was always I started knitting a lot after college. And so it was like always making things for my friends. And like I said, around the holidays and whatnot. And I also started a jewelry company at one point with her sister, who's now a dear friend of mine as well. And so I always had these creative endeavors. But we were so busy with the foundation, and she's such a lovely person. And although, it was wonderful to like do good work and be helping people, I just always wanted, still in the back of my mind, I'm like, I just want to do something that is like, has a creative force behind it. And so when I turned 30, a friend of mine convinced me to climb Mount Kilimanjaro with her, which is something I would never do. This friend was quite crazy and in a good way. And, really convincing powers. And so we set off to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I had never even been hiking before
Wow.
this, by the way. My only preparation was to wear my hiking boots walking to and from work, which was about a 45-minute walk. I walked back and forth in my hiking
Maybe
boots
not
every day for
exactly
like,
comparable.
but I read a lot of people saying that's like the best way to prepare is you really just don't want blisters
Oh, for sure.
because yes, there's a lot of endurance involved, but there's no special skills. And as long as you're like moderately active, you can make it to the top. And so we did.
Wow.
We somehow made it. I
I
cried the
think I
whole
may have
time.
seen a picture. Did you recently post one from that time?
Yes, because you know what? It was in February of 2013. And so I usually post a little in
Yeah, I
February,
think I saw that.
around that time. I
That's
always get the
incredible.
Facebook reminder and I'm like, oh, I should post this. Yeah.
So
So
awesome.
anyway, I climbed this mountain and I kind of went into it with this intention of figuring in my life out while I was there. Because I had read a book about a guy who recommended getting some affirmations together beforehand so that you have a lot of time alone in your head. It's like 9 hours of hiking
Right.
and not too much talking. So, to have like a mantra or something that you're
Yeah.
meditating on is really helpful just mentally to get through the day. And so I kind of had this idea in my head. Okay, I'm gonna figure out what I want to do, and I definitely want to do something creative. I just didn't know what it was. And I didn't really end up figuring it out there. But when we got back down to the bottom, the lodge we were staying at, there was this lovely British woman who was a garden designer, and she read tarot cards, and she was so inspiring. And she was like, I'll read your cards. So she was turning over all these tarot cards for me. And I was not really familiar with tarot, but she was saying, oh, this is such a lovely deck. There's so much like female power here and creativity and whatnot. And she's like, this last card I'm going to turn over will determine kind of like what you should do with the next 6 months, what you should focus on. And it was the Two of Wands card. And she explained to me that this card is all about having two options. On the face of the card is a man holding two wands, and one is in front of him and one is closer to his chest. And she said the one closer to him represents kind of like where he is right now in stability. And it's not bad to not choose something different, not choose a different path, but it's not going to lead you to something greater in the long run. Whereas this wand that's out in front of him, you could see there was this like winding trail to a castle beyond that wand. And she said, if you want, this card a lot of time represents choosing something creative or choosing something that you normally wouldn't, that feels like a risk. But you're going to have this long, windy road, but it will lead you to that castle, to the greater fulfillment in the end. And so she said, are you thinking about changing your job? Are you thinking about doing something, that maybe other people wouldn't agree with, or something that feels like a risk? And I was like, well, I have been thinking about doing something creative, leaving my job. So she's like, I would really focus on that in the next 6 months. Card is showing that this energy is surrounding you right now. So when I got back to New York, I kind of really set that in motion, and I opened an Etsy shop and just called it Two of Wands, but I didn't know what I was going to put in it. And then it took me a long time to quit my job because I had been there for so long. It was just, there were a lot of things to pass off and to train other people. And so I think it was about 8 months later, it was in 7 or 8 months later, it was in November of 2013 that I finally was no longer working there. And it was around the holidays. So of course I was knitting things, and I thought, I'll just put some of this stuff in that Etsy shop, and no one will probably see it. Well, it took off. I had created a few things that were reminiscent of this Hunger Games vest in the second film. And then I made one that was very similar, just because I knew that was like where a lot of popularity was coming from. The original one that I had done is called the armor scarf.
I think I've seen that one.
Still one of my designs.
So pretty.
And so I don't know if I tagged it with something that had to do with the Hunger Games, or that made people find that listing from there. It's not even really that similar, but whatever. There was a lot of interest in that. And so that really helped me get started. Then I created this Huntress vest, which was based on the one in the film. And that really helped me launch this little shop. And so it just kept taking off more and more. And I would add more things.
Was this patterns, or did you actually knit?
No, so this was just finished. So you finished the pieces initially
and sold them. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
It was something. And I'm like, this is completely unsustainable. You can only do
so
many hours of knitting. And I was, so thankful. I was getting so many orders, but it was really exhausting.
Right.
And eventually I was making like the same things over and over and over again in the same color mostly.
Of course, yeah.
So I'm like, I don't want to do, this is, I'm never going to expand
No, you can't scale that.
Pay someone else to do it too, then you would be losing money. So I had read like an Etsy success article interview with a girl from Argentina who sold bikini patterns. And it was really inspiring because she's like, I can travel all over the world and write these patterns, and I'm not tied to like a specific location because I don't have inventory. And I was like, this sounds amazing. I love to travel. I want to have a little bit more freedom. And so I started selling the patterns to the things that I was selling finished pieces of. I was designing everything I was selling anyway. They're very basic stuff initially, And the patterns, we realized this is scalable because it's more passive income. You put the pattern out there once and sell multiple times, and, not too much work involved. There is a lot of customer service stuff.
Absolutely.
And the more are really,
and I'm
the more customer
and I'm just so impressed too by, the amount of patterns that you come up with every year. Like, as far as I'm a follower, I've been a follower for probably like right around the pandemic, like 2020-ish, I think I found you. And then that's how I got into getting my kits from Lion Brand, because you teamed up with them. But when I'm looking at the way you design, it looks like you're doing like a spring and then a fall
Well,
kind of a collection most years. Is that right?
yeah. Yeah. So I think that comes from my
Mhm.
fashion design background, like getting inspiration for a season and really wanting to do themed collections. I love storytelling. And for me, when I'm designing something, I like my inspiration comes from like, where would I want to wear this piece? And like, what's the feeling? It's the mood. And so like, even when it comes to what I name
Yeah.
the things, like I'm holding always like an energy, a mood in my mind. And that helps me with the inspiration of like how I want the fabric to feel and look and drape and all of that. And that a lot, that has to do with the seasons as
Right.
well. But I think the storytelling aspect really helps other people connect with that feeling too of that piece. And it just makes it more special as
Yes.
you're making something that has a real, I don't know, mood behind it. And
Yeah.
so
Do you use mood
love those
boards for that purpose or?
I
Yeah.
do, yeah. So when I started designing patterns, I was still selling finished pieces because I was afraid to let that go because, you sell one finished scarf for like $100 is much more than selling like 20 patterns for $5. When I slowly transitioned out of that selling finished pieces to where I was only selling patterns. And then someone from Lion Brand reached out to me. I was only selling on Etsy still at this point. And this was in 2016. Someone from Lion Brand, excuse me, reached out to me on Etsy, and they were just starting their kind of blogger, indie designer outreach. Said, would you want to do one pattern for us? And I was like, sure. So I designed something called the coffee shop wrap, which completely took off for some reason. It was a triangle scarf. I feel like there's so many versions of this out there now. And of course, there were triangle shawls out there. I don't know what it was about this one. It just really took off. I hit it at the right time. And they're like, would you want to do more? Would you want to do more? And so eventually I started doing, I have contract with them. So I think in 2018 is when I was doing like maybe 12 to 20 things for them a year. And I started doing seasonal collections. So one in the spring, one in the fall. And then in 2020, we launched a yarn together called Hue and Me, which was really exciting.
That was exciting. I think I found you right around that time when you launched.
The pandemic was huge for our industry in general. I mean, so many people, I think, who already were knitters really took to, or crocheters, of course. And I do both and sell patterns for both. People really leaned into those yarn crafts during that time as a form of self-care and, mental health reasons because it was such a scary, uncertain time. And to have something like that in your arsenal really helped people get through the day, I think. And then, of course, people who had never knit or crocheted before were drawn to it because they were bored at home or looking for a new craft or something to pass the time. So it was a really wonderful kind of explosive time for me as a designer. It was really exciting. And that's when we launched Hue and Me, which has become super successful. And it's such a loved yarn. So many other designers and so many makers. And then we launched another one in 2022 called Color Theory.
Which I can't decide which one is my favorite, but they're obviously used for different things, right? One is more bulky.
So Hue and Me is a bulky weight wool acrylic blend. Color Theory is a worsted weight, 100% acrylic, super soft. Yes. Both of them are machine washable and what I would call like a workhorse yarn. It's something that you can use for multiple things, home decor, garments, accessories. You always want it on your shelves to reach for. It's not like a specialty yarn that you're going to save for certain projects. This is something that, you're going to use often and you're going to want to go back for more.
I 100% agree. And what I love about both of those lines is that they have the most amazing colors. And then different, as the name says, hues, right? Of the different colors, which I think you can combine endlessly. And I have to say, so everybody who's listening, you have got to follow Alexi because she always posts these amazing combinations of all the different yarns from her both lines. And I'm always just drooling over those. Like, it's the most amazing. I'm like, okay, I take screenshots of your stories when you do that so that I can go back and be like, okay, which one am I actually going to use? Because I just trust you 100% when it comes to combination of the colors because, you know what you're doing there. And I'm just like, no, I'm just going to go with one of the combos that you have already picked out. But I just love that you do that.
Well, I have all of the colors in front of me too, so it's easier for me to kind of move them around and see the way that they go together.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Realize one small component of my beginning origin story, which I think is kind of a cool aspect, which is that so I had named this Etsy shop Two of Wands, and I put all this knitwear in there. And as I'm selling and people are sending me messages on Etsy, they're like, I love the name of your shop
You
because
have two
obviously
wands.
you named it
Yeah.
the two knitting needles. Like, oh man, I totally did
Oh
not.
my
It was just so simple.
gosh. See, and that's why I thought
And
that was the name.
yeah, no. So it's
That's
based off this tarot card, but now it has this
I
double
love it.
meaning to me because, it does knitting needles are magic. And so
Absolutely agree.
they're like wands. So it really it suits it
I love
perfectly.
it so much because honestly, that's what I was thinking too, that you named it because you're using
Mhm.
two wands.
Yeah. I didn't even put that together, but it's
How
very the
meant
universe
to
knew all
be
along.
is that. Exactly. And that's so great. I'm so glad you shared that story because, again, I had no idea. And that just makes the whole thing just so much better. I love it. I wanted to go back to the self care part of knitting that you mentioned. You mentioned it specifically during the pandemic, of course, because everybody was looking for something they could do that eases the stress during that time.
Yeah.
I often talk about knitting as a form of self care on this podcast. It's the main reason it exists because I went through that same thing, and knitting literally saved me from
Mhm.
breakdowns and, mental anxiety, all the things. And I'm a mom of three. You just had a baby. This
Yeah.
last year, right? He's a little older.
Yeah, Halloween.
But I would love to ask you specifically about knitting or crocheting, of course. Like, how has it impacted your personal well-being? And is there any, besides the pandemic, is there another story that you might be able to share where it helped you through challenging times? Is this something that you really consider when you do this craft? And is it important to you?
Yeah, I would say, in those years leading up to me really wanting to change my job, it was definitely something that I craved doing. I would get home from work, God knows what hour, because I had a personal assistant, and I lived next door to her, so it was like all the time. So any free moment I had, I would just be like, oh, I just want to
Mhm.
relax and knit something, And so I gravitated towards it for that reason,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think that anyone who knits or crochets understands the the benefits of it from like cognitive
Mhm.
reasons and also for just people are like, don't you think we're gonna get like carpal tunnel or arthritis? I'm like, I'm pretty sure it protects you against
You
those
know what?
things.
I
Like
think
people
so
are
too.
never
Because you're moving. I mean,
yeah.
it could probably have that effect if you're not, maybe not in, if you're not
I
a
think you have to take
seasoned
care of
knitter, if you're not
yourself,
doing it
obviously.
often, I could imagine that,
Yeah.
increased amounts will do that.
Yeah.
But I feel like the more you do it, the less you have issues with your hands.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And I change from knitting to
Mhm.
crochet, different yarn weights, different needle sizes constantly. So I think that also helps you exercise your hands in
Yeah.
different ways. If you're just using like lace weight yarn and tiny, tiny needles and you're just repetitive movements like that, then I can see how that could
That's
be
true. No, that's
causing
totally true. There's definitely techniques, and
tense
sometimes
hands.
when you have like the really super bulky yarn and the needles are really, really big,
Oh yeah,
that can hurt my hands more because I move
totally,
more,
totally.
right, than the little ones. But yeah, that's definitely true.
And there's one funny thing that I've spoken to so many friends who knit or crochet and other designers. It's like we're so used to doing it in any spare second
Yeah.
that we have that oftentimes, especially in front of the television, right? So like oftentimes I can't watch TV unless I'm knitting. I can't pay attention to things unless I have yarn in
Yeah.
my hands. Which seems like counterintuitive because you'd think you have to concentrate on one, but no, it actually
Yes.
helps me
I
focus.
love
Weirdly, it
that
like
you
keeps
share
my
that.
hands busy so I can dial into a television show or something. So
I agree with
or if
that
I'm home
completely. I do find
with a
myself
webinar,
thinking,
you know?
what am I need something to do with my hands. And I feel like a lot of people have that thing where it's like my mind is going and going and going. But when you occupy your hands, and you do have to, in some cases, you really have to pay attention to the pattern. It's not always mindless,
Yeah.
but in any case, you are focusing on something, and it just really helps relax the mind. And when your hands are busy, I feel like your mind will also, kind of calm down. So I think
Right.
that's such a great thing to talk about for sure.
Totally. Well, that is a good segue into what I was gonna say next, which is that as a designer, unfortunately, I have lost all meditative benefits of knitting, crocheting, because very little of it is something that I don't have to pay
Yeah.
attention to. I'm constantly doing math, I'm constantly stopping, restarting, pulling things out. I really need to focus, especially, if it's something that has an intricate lace or color work or garment detail, shaping on it, it's no longer that real soothing, easygoing knitting and crocheting. I am on a deadline, and now I have a baby. Prior to that, I'm kind of an overachiever, and I get super excited about so many things. I just want to make it all. I am not someone who has to go looking for inspiration. I have notebooks
A
upon
gift and a
notebooks,
curse.
just there's so many things, and I just there's not enough time in the day. And that makes me panicky because I'm like, I want to do these things. And it's not stress because someone else is making me do it, or it's not stress because really of the deadlines. It's like, no, I want to keep going. I have so many ideas. I just want to get it out, But so I don't have that real meditative moment.
And it's funny, I was actually going to ask you that very question. Like, how has it changed since this is your work, this is your job, and this is something that you do every day? Does it have the same effect? But do you still have projects that you just do for yourself? Or
no, I mean, I don't have time. If I'm doing something for myself, I'm going to release it as a pattern. I can't tell you the last time I made someone else's pattern. It was like before I was doing this professionally, for sure. I haven't. And that's why the whole process of being a designer has been an interesting one for me, because while I have, that background in garment construction and whatnot, I don't have a huge background in knitting. I was a very basic knitter, and crochet began. And I taught myself crochet, by the way. That was the other story. I taught myself crochet on a flight to Costa Rica in like 2010 or something. So that came to me much later in life than the knitting did. But where was I going with this? Oh, yes. So I'm more of like a beginner intermediate in both crafts when I started. And so I had to teach myself and learn on the go a lot of different techniques and different stitches. And it's not something that, so I haven't made a lot of other people's patterns. I think if I would have been knitting for many, many years and then I decided to be a designer, but I've always kind of gone rogue. Even when I was following someone else's pattern, I'm always like, I'm going to change this and do this. So I use them as like a skeletal base for kind of just to understand maybe the structure of something, but I never really followed a pattern fully all the way.
But as a designer, I can completely see that, because you already have in mind how this is going to fit together. Like when I look at a shirt, I'm like, wow, that looks really nice, but I have no idea what makes it look nice, right? Like I need your patterns to know, okay, so, now I know which pieces go where in order to make it look this certain shape. And that's why I find that so very impressive that you come up with not only good range of new patterns every season, really, but also I'm just so impressed by the speed of which you're knitting them up. Like I make maybe one piece every 2-3 months.
A lot of that was pre-baby, I will say. And, the funny thing is, if I do ever have free time, which I haven't since I've been pregnant, basically, but prior to that, I would still want to fill my free time with knitting. So, like, if I'm finished with my projects, I'm like, what else can I design? Let me, I love to support friends who are hand yarn dyers as well. So I accumulate so much yarn that I can't necessarily use for patterns because, like I said, I am on contract with Lion Brand, and so I have to do a certain number of patterns for them a year, so it doesn't leave a lot of space to do stuff with other yarn. But anytime I have a moment to, I do try to work those in because I really enjoy working with a variety of different yarns. They all have different purposes, and so, like I said, if I do have free time, I'm gonna still knit, which is funny because it's my job and it's exhausting sometimes.
I totally get that, but it's funny. I used to be a photographer. I still am a photographer, but I'm not doing it for a living anymore. And it's funny too because I actually worked with a designer in the past she was creating garments, but she wasn't knitting, she was sewing them. But it was just very interesting to see that part. So a lot of the stuff that you were saying in the beginning about the industry, I saw in there as well. But I do remember not feeling like taking my camera along with me anymore because I was just doing it for work. And I'm like, oh, no, don't want to even lug this thing around anymore. But with knitting, I can see it. And I just love the portability of it. Like you can literally just take it wherever you're going. And I've seen you knit like while you're walking and hiking and and all the things.
That comes out of necessity. That is a necessity. I'm like, I'm not going to get it done if I don't, because I will say the bulk of being a designer is really I'm on a computer. I have to find the time to actually do
craft
the yarn work. And that's typically late at night after everyone else is asleep. So the way that I get all this stuff done is that I just don't sleep, which is not great for your health. So if anything, I'm the opposite of the self-care, don't do what I do. It's funny, I have a friend who is a, fitness she works in the fitness world, and she has a significant Instagram following, and she's always, promoting these things that are great for wellness, and exercise is so great, but she's, telling me behind the scenes, I wish I could live this lifestyle that I'm, telling other people to
Oh,
do because she's building
yes.
this for other people, so it's hard for
Yeah.
her to have she doesn't have any free time either to do any of these
Mhm.
things. So when you're the one kind of, manning the ship, it's difficult to really
It's a lot of work, especially when you're the only
have.
person doing it and you're doing all the actual, I mean, you have to put the pattern in writing too. It's not just, oh, I'm designing this thing. I know so little about the designing process. I find it fascinating just to go behind the scenes. So whenever you post some
Mhm.
of those things, I just love watching that. But
Yeah.
yes, to everybody who's listening, just get her patterns and knit them. And you get the, self-care benefit out
You
of
get the
getting
benefits,
these
yeah.
patterns. One more thing that I wanted to mention is that I find it so awesome that I know you probably primarily knit, I would say, or is it like 50-50? And
It's like
50-50?
50/50 actually,
And you
yeah.
do a lot of
Yeah.
your patterns in both crafts, which I find so fun. And it seems like that it's you giving yourself a challenge with creating the same type of garment with the other
Mhm.
technique. And that's always fun to watch. I made you got to help me with the names because I don't remember all of them, but I made that shawl, the very fluffy one, the winter one, the stole.
Oh, the
Soiree.
soiree
Yeah.
or the that
So I made the knitted
yeah.
version and then you came out with the
Right.
crocheted version after. And they look almost the same. And I think that's
Yeah,
just so amazing because there's people who just don't like knitting as much as they like crocheting or the other way around.
totally. And, some people are, reluctant to try the
Yeah.
other craft. They will say, "I tried so many times, I can't do it." But, if you
Yeah.
practice, you're gonna get it. Actually, if you know Gay Glaspie, her Instagram is Gigi Made It. She's the iconic orange
Oh,
lady is
yes.
who she
Yes.
her
Of
tag.
course I do.
She has this
Love it.
phrase that I just love, which is that it's not hard, it's just new.
Yes.
And that is so true. I mean, everything seems difficult in the beginning, but it's just because it's new to you. So I always encourage people, if you see something that's a knitting pattern and you're a crocheter, it may seem out of reach at this point, but just practice and you'll get there. And vice versa. If you're a crocheter, you want to try something knit, again, just keep trying. But I do tend to do a lot of stuff in both crafts, mostly because I get really sometimes angry, usually really nice, but a lot of times demanding people in comments every time I release something in one craft asking, when's the next one coming? When's the crochet one coming? I'm like, can't you just be happy that this exists in general? You know? And of course, I want everyone to be happy and I would love to do everything in both crafts, but also sometimes things just don't work in both,
Yes.
there's certain aspects of each craft that make them what they are that are beneficial for different things. And so crochet has more
Mhm.
structure. Knitwear tends to have more stretch, and while I can do some things in both, and sometimes I enjoy the challenge of figuring it out in both crafts, whatever I release it in first is usually what it's better suited to because that's why I chose that craft for, you know?
Yeah, so I can totally see that. I can see, and you just recently released those little baskets, which are so cute, like Copenhagen, right? And of course, that
Yes,
has to be
opening.
crochet. There's really no way to make that out of knitting, as far as I know.
Yeah,
So,
they wouldn't have the
yeah.
structure, it would be really difficult for them to stand up. You can create similar shapes, but you can't necessarily change the
Mhm.
density of the fabric. I mean, yes, you can change yarn weights and needle sizes and all of that. One example of like a slouchier kind of basket is I have these, they're called the slouchy hanging baskets, and I originally did them in crochet, but I had so many knitters asking for them. So I did figure out a knit version, but it requires a stitch that's a bit frustrating to work, and it takes a lot
Oh,
longer to
yeah.
make them. Well, that's why I didn't do it in knitting initially, but you can do them. It's just going to be a harder process.
Interesting. I love everything about this. I have written down a couple notes here because I would love to share the links to the patterns that we did mention. But
Absolutely.
here to wrap up, I would also love to ask you, do you have any new patterns that are coming out soon? We're in the spring-ish season. It's hot here today. You're on the East Coast too, so I don't know how it's there.
I
But
am,
here,
yeah.
oh my gosh, we're on the 90s here today. So yeah, I guess we're in spring. But yeah, do you have any new patterns coming up? Do you want to share about them? And also, I would love to know where people can reach you and where they can follow you.
Absolutely. Well, I every month I release one new pattern with Lion Brand, and sometimes there's two in a month, and sometimes I'll skip one. Right now, I am actually wrapping up a pattern that I'm turning in today. It's called the Costa Market Bag, and this is a version of my very popular French market bag, which is one of my most popular patterns. I released back in
Something
2017.
I have yet to make.
This is gonna be it's similar to that. It's a crochet pattern, one of those like net market bags, but the great thing about this one is the holes are a little bit smaller, so you'll be able to put smaller objects in it. And I have written the pattern for 3 sizes.
That's cool.
So, and it's gonna be free on my blog. So it will be available as a kit through Lion Brand, free on my blog, and you can always purchase any of my free blog patterns as PDFs, printer-friendly PDFs as well. And after that, I'll be diving right into the next pattern with them. And I don't necessarily know exactly what I'll be doing right after that. We've got some other fun projects, Lion Brand and myself, in mind for the coming years. So definitely stay tuned for that.
Yes.
It may or may not be a new yarn. I'll give you that
Ooh,
hint.
okay.
Very beginning stages, I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but we're always looking to, add to the arsenal. So that is a potential thing. And of course, I don't think I'll be doing any solid collections this year just because of my time being a little compromised lately with the new guy. We also bought a house right before I moved in 2 weeks before I had the baby. And so I went from a 1-bedroom apartment to like a 4-bedroom house. So it's unfurnished really. There's just still, I don't know how I'm going to ever unpack all these boxes and put everything away. So there's just a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes
Absolutely.
in addition to the knitwear gig. So
But it does sound like you love what you do.
What's the look?
And I think it sounds like you love what you do, even being busy and having all these new things that you're now kind of trying to figure out in your life, which I mean, I've been there. Like the youngest is almost 12, so I know exactly how that is. It's been a while, but things always continue to change, right?
Oh yeah, there's different challenges at every age, right?
It's all coming and going in seasons, as we all know. So you kind of, have to roll with the punches. But I feel like if this craft, and if it's giving you this, like, maybe in your case, not currently the self-care aspect, but still something that you love about it. Like, I feel like, for everyone else listening, sticking with I feel like it's beneficial either way. So I think it's just so fantastic.
I look forward to getting to like the body of a top-down sweater or something like that, where it's just like, oh, it's a sea of stockinette. I can like watch a show, or like do something. I still look forward to that stuff. So you can find me, the best place to purchase patterns, I would say, is on my website, twoofwands.com. And I would say on my website also, you can sign up for my newsletter. If you are new to the site, it'll be a pop-up when you first go to it. Otherwise, you can go to the footer of the page. There's another place to sign up for the newsletter there. That's the best place to learn about new pattern releases, sales, and things like that. Of course, you can follow me on social media, on Instagram and Facebook. I am at Two of Wands. But, with the algorithm these days, I feel like no one sees it there. So the best place, like I said, is really the newsletter. So I would encourage everyone to sign up for the newsletter if you want to find out about new pattern releases. Most of the patterns that I do with Lion Brand are free. Occasionally, there will be some that are paid only. And I do have also, I should mention, knit along and a crochet along that I am, again, in the very beginning stages of planning that will happen hopefully like mid to late summer. I'll just tell you, it's going to be 2 triangle scarves, my favorite thing ever to make. And they're going to be really fun. And it's going to involve a lot of color combination.
Oh, that's fun.
Color combined.
And I know those are very beginner friendly as well, which is really important for my listeners because we have some people who have not even started knitting yet. So I think your patterns are really, really great for beginners, or at least a good amount of them. Not every single one, but a lot.
And you can, when you go to my website, at the top in the navigation, go to patterns, and then you can choose clothing or home decor or accessories, men's patterns, children's. And in each of those categories on the left side, you can also select beginner beginner level, advanced level, intermediate level, easy level. And so you can search for your skill set. And in each of the listings, I also describe the different techniques that you'll need to use. So it's pretty easy to navigate and to find a pattern that's suitable for your level.
That's awesome. And I just talked about beginner level, or not just, but like according to your personal level patterns in the last episode. And I definitely always recommend yours for beginners. But what I also wanted to mention is that your Lion brand patterns, so the pattern itself might be free on there, you said, or mostly, but you can also buy them together with the yarn as a kit,
Yes,
correct? Okay.
Yes, even the patterns of mine that you have to purchase as a PDF, like on my website or Ravelry or Etsy or whatever, if it's in a kit with Lion brand, that includes the pattern for free. So you're getting the yarn and the pattern. So essentially, you're buying the yarn, but you're getting the pattern free.
And I think that's so important, especially for somebody who's just getting started, because when a yarn is recommended in the pattern and you don't really know exactly what you're doing yet, it's really helpful to have the exact yarn that the designer used as well. So I love the kits and I recommend them to everybody, because then you have almost guaranteed success. So
thanks so much. Yeah, absolutely. And one other little tidbit, a lot of people don't know about this. There's a website called yarnsub.com. And so if you're, for instance, in another country, or you don't have access to the yarn that I used or that any other designer used in a pattern, or if it's discontinued or something like that, because yarn, of course, gets discontinued all the time, go to yarnsub.com. It's a huge database of like every yarn that's ever existed. You can type in the yarn that you're looking for a substitute for, even if it's discontinued, and it will give you every result ranked from like in percentages. This is a 99% match. This is a 92% match. And it tells you why. It tells you this is the same weight, but it may be a little bit more stretchy, or like this has a different color palette. It's really detailed and it's super helpful for substitutions.
That's fantastic. I'm one of the people who didn't know about it. So I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Yarnsub.com.
Awesome.
It's such a great resource.
I will share this link too in the show notes, and all the other things that we talked about, the coffee shop scarf. Oh, and then I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the Happy Hearts Foundation. Is that still active?
It ended up merging with another organization that was called All Hands. And so now it's called All Hands and Hearts. And it's both volunteer they work with volunteers on the ground to rebuild. It's also fundraising, back here in the States.
Great.
But yeah, it's they're doing incredible work.
We'll share that too. So I think that's fantastic.
I recommend checking that out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Alexi, for your time and for telling your story. I absolutely loved what you shared. And I'll see you soon around on social media.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so honored to have been here. Thank you so much for having me. And if you have any follow-up questions,
we're here to help. Thanks so much. Hey mama, I hope you've soaked up some great ideas from today's episode. Remember, a happy mom makes for a happy fam. If today's chat hit home with you, it would mean the world if you could leave a 5-star written review on iTunes. Your review will help other moms discover our community and embrace guilt-free self-care. Also, if you're scrolling through Instagram, why not snap a screenshot of this episode for your stories? Don't forget to tag me at The Knitting Mamas so that I can shout you out on my page as well. Plus, that way we can stay connected and spread the self-care magic. Oh, and have you heard about our cozy Facebook community? It's a guilt-free zone where we share relaxing routines, essential oils, and knitting adventures, and so much more. Come join us today at bit.ly/knittingmamas and let's unwind together. Until we chat again, take care, mama. And remember, looking after yourself is not selfish. It's essential for that balanced life. Catch you soon right here on the Knitting Mamas podcast.